Thank you for coming. That's really cool. Yesterday was the big party, I heard. And who was actually on the party yesterday? Thank you, thank you. Oh, so many people. Who got wasted? Just 2 people. That's fair enough. But still, you too, thank you for coming today, getting up early, and yeah, getting to a topic which really is almost a little bit emotional to me because it changed my perspective, whatever, on how to do pull requests. Yeah, my name is Felix Eckhardt. I'm the CTO of Riskadent, and I just want to give you some thoughts on who I am, so you can better get a picture about me. This is where it all started. My family, it was Christmas, and they gave us a 286, and I was super pumped and excited. Actually, it was for the family, but it ended up in my cave. And that was one of the first games I played. Does everyone knows what this game is? Over there? Monkey Island. Who still had it on this disc? All right, wow, there are quite a few people. For everyone else, this was actually the code protection, right? So you couldn't copy it because you needed that disk, and it was impossible to copy. So yeah, just to give you an idea about copy protection back in the days. So yeah, that was the graphic, beautiful 320 by 240, and for me that was amazing what a computer could do and stuff like that. And the game is really good. If you haven't played it yet, you should. There is also a HD version right now out. So that's when I started making, or I thought I should create my own games, and I started with Turbo Pascal as my first language. Then later on, the more advanced one, which is Delphi, and then I went over to Java. How many people have coded Java? I think that is, yeah, that's pretty much the mainstream language. Turbo Pascal? Oh, still, quite nice. Maybe some hacking session on Turbo Pascal for the good old days. And Haskell, who have ever programmed Haskell? Oh, quite a few. Nice, nice. That's why you came here, these structured people who want to make a pull request every day. And I did a little bit of C, C++, because that's actually that was my home office, and that's where I solder stuff together because I love IoT. I love making things physical, not only have it in a virtual space. So yeah, now you have a picture a little bit about me, and now let's get to Riskadent. We are 70 people fighting the bad guys. We are, as you can see on my t-shirt, the fraud busters. We are the one who creating software which is actually a Sherlock Holmes software. So what it does is actually things like Sherlock. Anybody has seen the series Sherlock with Cumberbatch? Okay, not many. Anyway, how he sees the crime scene is really, really cool. He's imaginary how the murder did the case, and that's pretty much what we do. We're trying to figure out what did the fraudster do? How did he do it? How did he get the money out of the people? So to give you a better picture, we fighting on shop sites like Otto in the e-commerce. So if people want to steal iPhones or MacBooks or whatever, or in the telecommunication where it's about phones like Telecom or Vodafone, that are our partners which use our software. So just to give you a brief idea what you have to do to become a fraudster, just a real quick run through. So you're sitting there in front of the computer. That is actually how never a fraudster looks. Because he wouldn't wear a mask because he's sitting alone. Why should you wear a mask? Anyway, but he's going onto that website. So what he's doing, he's getting from someone the payment methods he needs, like for example, credit cards. So he buys that on the dark web. Then he has to ship the goods to somewhere. And then another one is running around and putting a different name on your letterbox that it's possible to deliver the goods. Or even better, he's talking to the postman and says, listen guy, there's gonna be a package and I need it from you. You get $20 and then we make a deal. Stuff like that. That is really happening, and that's where we create software. This is not our office, that's not us, but this is how many people imagine how fraudsters work together. This is totally false. They don't know each other, they are anonymously, they're separated. It's more like remote office. More like this style. So they don't know each other. Everyone does a little piece and someone pulls the strings, which is hard to catch. And that's the software, how it looks like, part of it, where you analyze how fraud is actually happening and stuff like that, which is one of the parts we're creating. And to make this possible, we use some fancy technologies which are really, really necessary to make that possible. One of them, to name it, like random forest, just one thing what we're using out of the machine learning box in the supervised area. There are many more, but yeah. If you want to know more, just come to us, and maybe you're looking for a job and want to fight the bad guys, you're more than welcome to help us with that. Yeah, this is a little switch. This is me in Australia, like about, I don't know, 1 year ago. This is actually not a terrible spider, it's just a huntsman spider, which is not deadly, so all good. There are more deadly animals, but actually the most serious animal is a bumblebee, which can kill you. The other ones don't really kill anyone anymore that much. And during that time, I was working at a company called Ambiada. And Ambiada is a Haskell company. They do productive code with Haskell, which was for me like super amazing, because I haven't seen a company which really uses Haskell in productive. Is anyone here uses Haskell in production somewhere? Yeah, that's the problem with Haskell. Even though it's such a cool language, there's so less people who really go all the way, all the functional way. And at this company, they introduced me to the concept of pull requests a day. And that's where the idea for me was born. At first, I hated it, and later on, I started really liking it. So yeah, a pull request every day. What does that mean? How can you accomplish that? And we at Risk@End, we have core values. These are 3 of them. And so it's deliver quality, it is keep it simple and fail fast. And one of our employees was coming up to me, Kevin, and he said, or he asked me, Felix, so many core values, how can I do them? They are in conflict. If I want to deliver quality, I can keep it simple and I can make it fast. I can't fail fast and stuff like that. So he was confused, and I thought, listen, there is a way of solving that problem, and that is actually pull request a day, in my opinion. There are challenges, and understand, and that's why Kevin is thinking that way. Let's just go through how it actually happens. So it starts, you know, when you're planning, when there's grooming, and you try to figure out, you have a story out of the backlog, and it's a medium-sized story, right? And I know all of us say it doesn't count in numbers, but in our heads, we always count in numbers and in days. So let's say this medium-sized story is between 3 and 7 days, whatever, you know, something in between. And so a developer starts developing on it, and 2 weeks later, he's sitting there and he's just like, oh God, where did I end up? What happened? This issue is more complex than I ever thought. And he's ending up in the complexity problem, as I call it. So if this is complexity, right, down here, the bulb, then we are the developer, the mosquito. And we are so tempted to go into the complexity trap and go to the light, because we love the light, we love complexity in most cases, and then we get burned, and then we say, I'm never going to do that again, and then that repeats. So we need a technique to figure out how to get out of this loop. And if you have ever seen something like this is the result of 2 weeks or 3 weeks working on a pull request, and then you have 1,587 lines, which somebody has to review. Does anybody have ever seen something about over 1,000 lines, 1,500? How does it make you feel if you have to review that kind of bulk? Everybody's so quiet. Yes, exactly. You're like, how should I review that? There's so many lines. And there is a really nice guy, you should follow him on Twitter. I'm a developer, and he says it pretty much really good. He says, if you have 10 lines, yeah, then people come up with the 10 issues. But if you have 500 lines, then everyone, oh yeah, looks good, I think it's perfect. Let's just get it through. I don't want to look through. And that's exactly the problem. And that is what also pull request today is facing. So in the worst case, you're going to end up with this message. you know what? Your pull request is a piece of shit because you're touching so many pieces, and I won't merge that. And when this happens, true friendship arises in a team. Just think, you are the one working 3 weeks on some big monument, and then another one says, that's too complex. Screw it. That's really when good relation starts. And I think everyone had a discussion about these pull requests. And then there's the product owner in the end, because the one said, oh, fuck it, let's just push it to the master. I don't want to see it anymore. I don't want to think about it, and I don't want to talk to that person because he's a dickhead. Anyway, that happens, and then the product owner says, fine, that's how we invented the swing. That was your story. That's your goal. And so the problem is that we should keep ourselves more in sync, and that is the thing we have to do. And another thing is the rabbit hole we go down. Like, do you know these pull requests where somebody said, oh, I just need to refactor this a little bit, and then it turns out to be this rabbit hole where you suddenly, the feature is so tiny and the refactoring part is so big that you end up in a trap. So let's talk about a better world. A world where you have a complex problem, but you force yourself to break it down and to have it in smaller pieces. A world where you actually have a more connection to your teammates, where you have a faster synchronization, where you talk to each other when you have a problem, where you raise your hand when you don't know something. And a place, and that is the most important part, and that is something you can feel. If you do a pull request today, that means that you fulfill something, that you finish something complete and send it off, and you go home, you feel better because you don't have to think about the stuff you still have to make. You're not anymore inside of this problem. You finish something, a piece which works. So where do we start? How do we make a pull request today? And the thing you have to do, and that is the most important and crucial part, it's more a mental thing, it's the mental training which you have to do. You have to be able to break down complexity. If you can't do that, you have to train it. Don't give up. Because, in Agile we have epics, and we break epics into stories, and then who breaks stories even farther apart? A few. Exactly, and that's the good thing. That's what you should do with your team together and break it down, but you should break it down into pieces where you have one pull request a day, and that is important. That's what you have to train with your team together, because then you become more efficient. And let's say that starts, so there is the developer pushes something, and then it goes right into the master once he finished that. And then somebody in the next morning can already review that and say, that can be even the product owner, and says, oh yeah, that looks good to me. The API, that's where we're heading, or whatever. So there is the fast feedback circle. And that goes on, different people are always on track of your story, of what you're doing, and give you constant feedback, which is really important. And here, on pull request 3, the developer says, listen, developer, you did something wrong, you have to fix that. And he's not going for that 2 weeks run, and going in a complete different direction because the team is protecting you from doing that. So let's say there is a company, that's the imaginary company, and they have any question. That is the system where you can ask the presenter any question. And it looks like this. You type in a meeting number because you're in, which would the presenter show, and then you ask a question, which you like to ask to the presenter, and you type in your name, and you would say, all right, how do you make a pull request every day, for example, and then later on, somebody can answer that. I mean, the presenter will answer that. Let's say that is the application we're talking about, and let's say that can be completed in one story. So this is our virtual team which is going to do that. There is Boris, the full stack developer, sitting there. Actually, he's not a full stack developer, but anyway, let's imagine that. Jana, the developer, and John, the product owner, they both work in a team, and now they get started on that story. This is the most important part, where everything fails or succeeds, in my opinion, and where you have to train and become better. The task grooming, where you decide how to split the story. This is the learning curve you have to make in order to be more successful. the splitting. And one way of doing it, there are different methods, but I'm just going to show you one. It depends, of course, on your problem. In this problem, it's pretty easy. Our application consists out of a front end, a back end, and a database. So what most developers tempted to do is just, I'm going to take it all at once and just finish it up. And that's the problem, because then something with the database, you might get lost, or here between the front end, you can't decide. Try to break them down and make them composable, you know? And I would normally start with that story with the back end and would say, let's first focus on the back end and make on the first day something which is working on the back end where I can deliver something which is in its complete. You know, and then I'm going to go to the front end, and then I'm going to go through to the database. And then you sit down. John and Boris are sitting down and talking about how to do every day. You know, and of course a lot of stuff has to come from Boris because he's the developer. And he says, all right, on the first day, John is creating the front end flow and the mockups, and Boris is already taking care and setting up the project. And then he creates an API on the second day. And the important thing is here, he's just making API stubs in the model, not doing more. That is the crucial part. And on the next day, you start having some business logic included with that. So the question and everything get joined together a little bit, but everything in memory. Don't touch the database yet, because there's going to be more complexity. You're going to need more time. And you should focus yourself on just one thing at a time. And then on user interface database. That could be, you know, depending on your skills, how fast you are, that could be the schedule. So day one would be just like that. John and one of the developers are sitting together and just discussing, that's the flow, all right. And they check it in right away, first pull request, yay. And you have something, all right, everybody can look into from the start of the story. Day two, Boris in the morning gives instant feedback to John and says, yeah, I understand that. That's good. I understand the flow. Everything is fine. I can work with that. I can build something up on it. So that's the feedback you get. And then Boris later on is starting to think about, all right, how do I make the model? He's just focused on the model, and he's going to make just, you know, in Scala you do case classes or whatever, or you're just going to create your classes and make the relationship. And you're just going to define some endpoints and not more. You're going to make super simple stubs and stuff like that. That is important. That's what you have to learn. You have to learn how to break down a problem and not to solve it all at once. In one run. And on day X, whatever it is, there's the feedback. Somebody says, all right, Boris, the model you created or whatever, there are errors in it. We missed something. And the cool thing is there's the constant feedback. We're not waiting 2 weeks until the story is done, or a week or whatever, because then we lose a lot of time. So much code ends up in the trash because there was no good communication in between. And then you don't end up anymore with this structure of a swing. And for me at Ambiada, for example, and you have to decide by yourself, but a good routine was morning, you get a cup of coffee, and you watch your mates pull requests. And then you start developing by yourself, and you push in the evening before you go home. That can be, you can also do that during lunchtime, whatever. That depends on you, but that's some cycle. Make a habit out of it. Creating habits is really important in that, and just say, okay, in the morning I'm going to do that. There are, of course, requirements to do a pull request every day. You shouldn't touch refactoring too much. You know, if you see a little error on the side, that's fine. But if you find something like time box yourself, that is an important thing. If you think, all right, I'm going to start touching it, make a time box, say 1 hour. If it's going to be more than 1 hour, I shouldn't continue. I should make a ticket out of it because it doesn't belong into the feature PR. The other thing is, of course, your code should compile. Everything you commit should work and shouldn't break production, which is really essential. Another thing you should, of course, always do, and that's easier. If you have small commits, you can do tests, and your reviewer can immediately see if you missed the tests or not. In 500 lines commits, you won't see that, how many tests are really required. In smaller one, yes. And the good thing about it, so if you have these pull requests a day, you know, you get more in sync with your team, which is really, really a benefit. And you will never, ever commit more than 500 lines unless you do some refactoring, which is fine on its own. But yeah, that's pretty much the requirements. So the question you would ask is, so how does a pull request today work with continuous deployment? Because if you have continuous deployment, that means everything you create, your daily work, will be in production, or at least that should be the goal. And maybe some of you can already see the problem, but let's make it more obvious. Let's say for my application, I add a delete button, right? And that's the new functionality, so you can delete your questions by yourself. Then how should you follow the rule if you start just doing it in the front end or just in the back end? That might change the current running production code and might break it. So what you have to do is you have to use the awesome concept of feature toggles. Feature toggles is a solution to make you able to have different code states which are not productive ready 100% and still push it to production. And that's really a powerful method. So what you would do, you would have, that is just one way of doing that. There are multiple ways of implementing feature toggles. So you have your test user who sees already, that could be John, right? Checking out what Boris did because he pushed that and he can see it live in the production because he's logging in with his credential, and he can see if the button is working right or if it looks right, even though it's not working 100%. But he can give instant feedback, and the other users can still regular work on it. And another thing which is really cool if you do that, so that's more for continuous deployment, let me go back, is that you get always instant feedback if something breaks. Because I guess that's the reason why we should go for continuous deployment, because the batches, the bigger the batches become you deliver to production, the bigger are the problems later on to figure out what actually went wrong. So I'm really promoting the goal, always push to production. And yeah, let's go back. So that is just an example how you could do it. You work with feature enable and you say, okay, which user has, delete questions, whatever, and then you show the diff or you don't show the diff depending on. The subject feature toggles is way more complex than you think. There is a guy, Martin Fowler, who did a really, really great article on feature toggles and tells you much more about what you have to care about, because it also affects your testing. You have to think about how long should feature toggles be, should they just be for 2 weeks as long as the story is, or should they be longer? How do I clean up? Stuff like that. He's tackling that in that article pretty good. So what is the advantage again? And I think the greatest one is here. What's the bear name? I forgot it. Can somebody help me out with the name? Yes, exactly. So he's looking at himself, and in our feedback culture, why do we give feedback? Let's go with that. Is because we get a different view on ourselves. And if we are in that complexity trap, like I've shown you, the hardest thing is to detect that by ourselves. And pull request today is a way of realizing it's a time box every day. And once you can't tackle a problem in that space, then you're more tempted to raise your hand and say, listen, I need your help, Jana, because I can't figure out how to solve that problem. Maybe I'm stuck in my thoughts. So that's helping out. And also connecting your teammates together, because you're less afraid of asking stupid questions. And I know all of developers have pride and think, I have to know everything. But if you have pull requests a day, then these walls come down and you admit that you don't know something which you're afraid of asking. So that is a good thing. The challenges, if you do that, is, of course, your tasks are more spreaded. That means they are more loosely coupled, and you have to see these pull requests belong to that story, which makes it a little bit harder, but there are techniques to actually put them back together. It takes training and it takes work. It is, if you want to be strong and you go to gym, it's not like you go there 1 week and you're going to be Arnold Schwarzenegger. It's more a continuous thing you have to do. You have to do it for months at least to see that it works out, because it will change your way of coding. And the team should agree and should commit to that try to go for a pull request a day. I think it's really, really cool, but it takes some time. And the last one, trust between team members must exist, and that's important, because you will fail. You will fail fast, but you will deliver in a much faster speed. Because you will be more likely to accept that you are not perfect, which is really, really important. There's another book which goes in a little bit in a different direction, but I think what Eric Rice in this moment already puts out is, he's talking about how a lean startup should be, and that he's talking about rockets, that we're planning rockets sometimes, where we take way more time to plan that than actually driving a car, where we constantly see where we're going because we have a steering wheel. And for me, that means also break down your stories even smaller. The smaller you get, the better, the faster you become. And then that's important, because then you can adjust to obstacles on the way, which is difficult with Rocket. So yeah, thank you for your time, for your listening. I hope you enjoyed the talk, and if you have any more questions, just let me know and ask right now, I guess. Yeah, there is a question. That's part of the problem. That's what you will encounter, because it's a reverse engineering in that sense. Because if you break it down and you want to make days out of it, you will recognize, oh shit, I need many more days than I actually planned. It's a method to make you aware that the stories are too big. That's it's part of it. Yes. There are two sides. You're right. It is at that part, but also what I try to tackle is also, if you create something on the first day, so you do a pull request, you also get instant feedback from the people who work with you. That's that's also a success. You get much faster the feedback. I mean, you can also make 2 days. That depends. It's just this is a little bit pushing on the limit, but somewhere in that area should be your task, in my opinion. But that doesn't, that's absolutely true what you're saying. The story can also be a part of the problem, and it mostly is. Yes. It depends on, of course, on your use case, what you do. But if you separate it clearly enough, and that's where feature toggles are coming in, it shouldn't. But the cool thing is you will recognize that much easier, because you do a lot of reviews with your co-mates, and they will see, all right, if you commit this and it's not toggled right, for example, then yeah, this creates an issue. But I think it's much better than having a big PR and nobody sees the actual issues which are inside of it, even security issues. Yes, up there. Then it delays. That is fine. It's this is not you're gonna be punished if it's not working 100%. There gonna be some delay. Then you're working 2 days on it, which is fine too. This should be, and it was the same way at Yada. Of course, we're not always finished on one day, right? So it could be 2 days. It could be even longer. But it just gives you a sense on how small the actually should be. In a best case. So yeah, it's just a ground rule. It shouldn't be, like, oh God, you took 2 days. But you get aware if somebody takes 3 days, then you as a product owner go down to your developer and ask, sorry mate, why are you taking 3 days? I thought we discussed that this is a 1 day story. It's more bringing the awareness, and everybody focus on breaking down problems small enough so you don't have bad stories in the end, or not well defined. That is how you make stories. You know, the acceptance criteria you need to start with a story. That's maybe what's missing. In my opinion, once you start a story, syncing should already be done, or at least, you know. But there are some cases, I agree, where this doesn't work. But most of the time, what we're trying to accomplish that you mostly have all things up, so you're ready to go into the story. Some more question? Yes. Are you talking about unplanned, like some emergency, or okay? If I understand. So if first of all, if it's planned, you of course you should, you know, put the stories somebody can do during that week and not give him more. And if it's, you know, and the PO, the product owner, should actually protect the group of people like that coming in, because he's saying, hey, we're in the middle of a sprint, don't touch my team members. You know, that's what you need in that case, and he has to figure out how to put the resources. And yeah, there's always unplanned work, and then you can't do it, but that's okay. But unplanned work should be really not, you know, the regular case. Somebody else. Over there. Yes, they will. If you, but that should be one of the rules you come up with. Try to, you know, if you have small pull requests, and that's the cool thing about the small pull requests, because the reviews will be faster too. The problem with huge ones is that will stack up much more easily. But if you, you know, that's the habit thing. You have to make a habit out of these routines, and then you get into a flow. And of course, sometimes it takes longer, but most of the time you shouldn't, you know, spend hours and hours on let's say 100 or no, 50 lines of code, because then something other is broken or not clearly visible. But that can happen, you know, on occasion. Up there. Yeah, I mean that can happen. That depends on how you structure your project. Of course, that can happen. But that's again, you have to sync up. And normally, you should really try to do your pull request and not wait too long. And if there are dependency, maybe you have to restructure how you know, make your stories and where are the dependency and how you split that apart. There's no easy answer on it, but you will notice that once you try and you get this regular circle, then actually you will notice where are the problems now to solve them, and ask why can't you fill that? Of course. Exactly. Yeah. Yeah. True. All right, guys. Thanks for your attention. I hope you learned a little bit. You got challenged, and yeah. Still have a really nice code talks, and yeah. Thanks for listening.